Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to you all. This is Limitless, the podcast that makes the impossible possible. I'm Alex, and for today's episode, we're covering a topic which I still find difficult, but which is ultimately one we need to master if we are going to make big change in the world. How to fail. I've got a favourite quote from Winston Churchill which says, "Success is the ability to go from one failure to another with no loss of enthusiasm." There are two things this says to me. One is that life is full of failures, and the other is that when we're reaching for success, failure is not only possible, but inevitable. I'm not going to lie, I've liked this quote for many, many years, but I have not yet mastered the art of failing. And to be honest, I'm not that surprised. When we're growing up, life is of course full of failures as a kid. We try to walk, we fall down, we get back up again. It's all part of the learning process, and as toddlers, it's encouraged. It gets met with an "oopsie daisy, up you get" response, and the kid's frown turns into a smile and then they're off again. But there is some point in our childhood when failures become less celebrated. Suddenly, when we knock our breakfast onto the floor, we get told off and ordered to clean it up. When we go to school, failures must be squashed out so we can do well and achieve our grades. If we do something stupid in front of our friends, kids can be really unforgiving, and it may mean we lose our play friends for lunchtime. And so, over time, we learn that failure actually isn't an option. It's too dangerous and too risky, and so as we grow up, we become more and more expert at not failing. The problem with this is that real success is only possible by failing. Without failure, we can't learn. Without trying something we don't know whether will work, we can't find the things that will. Particularly with creative projects, or projects that are stepping out into a new territory. You can't possibly know whether they'll work, you can only try. And when you find the failures, you pick yourself back up and try again. Elon Musk is the owner of SpaceX, a company dedicated to getting humans into space and visiting other planets. He is a big thinker, and has pursued this dream of space exploration ever since he was a kid. As you can imagine, the amount of failures along the road of getting a rocket to go into space and land back on the Earth again is huge. And these can be huge, expensive failures too. He recently tested another rocket launch, which exploded on its return to Earth, and he and his team celebrated the failure, saying that they had more information to analyse for the next prototype and recognised that successes in the test too. Musk says of working at SpaceX, failure is an option here. If things are not failing, you are not innovating enough. From the man who is sending rockets into space and designing self-driving cars, I feel like this is a message we should listen to. Google runs an innovation lab called the Moonshot Factory. Its aim is to tackle some of the world's biggest challenges by inventing brand new technological solutions. They literally have failure parties. When I heard about this, I thought this was the best idea ever. They have a little celebration when one of their ideas doesn't work, and then gather together and work out why it failed and how to improve it. I think this is just amazing and much more like the sort of thing we should be teaching kids in schools. The thing is, you're here listening to this podcast right now because you want to make a change in the world and you want to do something that you've never done before. You want to make something which seems impossible to you right now. And the only way to do that is to be okay with failing. Take risks and fail and pick yourself back up again and look back and say, "Hey, I'm going to do that differently next time. That's awesome." Without stepping out and into the arena of failure, The only way you can possibly stay safe is to either do things you've done before or do things other people have done before. And the world needs more people to do things that no one has ever done before. One of the Bibles of my life is the book Daring Greatly by Brené Brown. I'm still learning to fail, but Brené makes me feel so much better about messing up. Her favourite quote is from Theodore Roosevelt, and it goes, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives and valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again." Failure is vulnerability, and we spend many years trying to not be vulnerable and to stay safe. Failure opens you up for criticism, which breeds self-doubt and questions your choices. Failure is rarely celebrated as we grow up, but instead mocked or scolded. But failure is an absolute essential element to creating possibility out of the impossible and taking steps forward into limitless creation. I feel like one of my biggest failures was choosing the wrong career. I studied computer science at college and then at university, and then ended up in a career in IT for 14 years. This was not the right choice for me. I knew this even whilst I was at university. I considered switching courses, and then when I graduated I started a teacher training course, but ended up back in an IT job and stayed there for a long time. However, there are many reasons I want to celebrate my failure. The leadership opportunities I've been given, the wonderful people I've met along the way, and the technical knowledge I've gathered are all reasons to celebrate. At times, I have felt like sticking with this wrong career choice to get me through the life stages of buying a house and having a family was the greatest failure of all. But perhaps it was my greatest strength. Or maybe it was indeed just a failure, but if I hadn't, I wouldn't be where I am today, and I'm kind of loving today. So, here's a little action for you, and I think I'm going to have to remember to do this one more often too. Think back to something you feel is a failure in your life, and write down a list of why that failure should be celebrated. This might be really hard to begin with, so try doing it with a friend or family member, or pretend the failure is someone else's and you're helping them come up with reasons to celebrate it. It can be anything, from small to big. Maybe you failed to cook a meal well last night, or maybe you bought a drum kit you've never played, or maybe you left a relationship you wish you'd stayed in. Whatever it is, write down what you learnt, what was good about the failure. And at the bottom, write, "I got back up and carried on." Thanks for listening to today's Failure podcast. This is Limitless, making the impossible possible. If you're brave enough to share your failure, come and tell me all about it on my Patreon page at www.patreon.com/limitless community, and we can celebrate it together. If you'd like to learn to be more vulnerable, I would highly recommend Brené Brown's book, Daring Greatly, and her world-renowned TED Talk, The Power of Vulnerability. She also has a whole load of other stuff out there that you can discover too. She really is an idol of mine, one of those people that I really hope one day I get to meet and maybe even interview for this podcast. Oh my goodness, that would be so amazing. So if anyone knows her, please do drop me a line. I'm only joking. Well, half joking. Anyway, enjoy her stuff and let's get vulnerable.